how are you?
Good.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Quick intro, my name is Spencer Chen. I head up growth and marketing for our portfolio companies here at Axiom Zen. And wait, are we wearing the same Apple Watch?
Yes, we are.
This is awkward.
So you can send me heartbeats whenever you want, Spence.
Wow, no memo on this. You know what? Stay seated if you think I wore it better. Okay.
Hey!
Okay, so I got a list of questions for you. We'll start with some easy ones.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think of Vancouver?
It's awesome.
Okay, that's all I had for the easy ones. No, I am, all seriousness, you killed iGoogle? How did you do that?
Okay, well, they actually technically decommissioned iGoogle years after I left, so I don't take responsibility for that. And the numbers kept going up during the experiment, so there's also that caveat. But look, I think my biggest lesson learned there, and I've done probably like a dozen redesigns of various parts of Facebook and Google since then, is that one, they're really hard. People love what they already have, right? And if you think about it, if you have a product that's used by mass consumers, this is something they like literally have spent, days of their life on, right? Like minutes at a time, but they've gotten used to everything. It's like going to someone's living room and rearranging their furniture and telling them it's better this way, right? So it's just hard, and you should do it with a strong reason, right? And the other thing is that, when you have strong user feedback, right, make sure you listen to it, right? Even if you, think that you're right and you're moving the future forward. So this is something that happens a lot, I think, when we live in the bubble we live in and we live and breathe the product, right? It's hard to step back, and it's hard to really understand what people are using your product for. The biggest mistake we made with that redesign, I think, was that we expected people to basically, some of you may have never used iGoogle, which makes me sad because it means I'm dating myself a little bit. But it was a personalized homepage with widgets, so like weather, email, news readers, and etc. And you could, just use it as your launch page on the internet. The funny thing is there's a bunch of trends that were happening at the time we were doing the redesign. One was that browsers were getting faster, and the internet itself was getting faster. So the idea of needing a space where you had the 7 pages you would open at all times was becoming less and less relevant, right? The other thing was that the idea of the redesign was that you could expand these widgets into full screen apps, essentially, right? And so you could actually lightly, delete or read your emails or go into full Google Reader experience with the RS readers. It wasn't what people wanted. They just wanted a launching pad, right? So sometimes you have to figure out your false premises sooner. And I think hindsight, I would have done a lot more user studies before we did that redesign.
Good recovery. Hopefully Gmail worked out better for you.
Are you still using it?
You got users on that thing? There was a number of things you mentioned actually in your presentation I thought was kind of fascinating. It was the first times I seen product management and product managers in a certain classification of taxonomy, right? Mm-hmm. And you had kind of broken down, this is one of the first things I caught in the presentation, you had broken down to all the different flavors of product manager types, from the one that's very design driven mm-hmm. to others that are just huge executors.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, do you recruit for those types, or do you recruit the generalist and then figure out what kind you have and nurture from there?
So I think it depends on where you are with your team and your product, right? So if you're at a very small startup or a very small team where the product is actually a little amorphous, right? You don't know what it needs to be good at yet, and you're just trying to figure stuff out, you just want smart people who can handle anything you throw at them. So I generally hire for smart, potential-driven journalists, and I'll even hire a mix of senior and junior just to kind of throw things, to make sure you have different perspectives. Building social products, you want someone who's been in college recently, right? We do not use the products the same way today in your 30s that you do in your 20s. But when the team gets more mature, when the product gets more mature, you start thinking about building a PM team the same way you think about building a product, which is what are you missing, right? And what are you over-indexed on versus what are you under-indexed on? I personally have a bias towards hiring people who get shit done, right? It's why I like to see my directs, and it's why I optimize for a lot. But sometimes I have to step back and be like, I need someone who's a little crazy. I need someone who like gives me a headache every other week because they're like, what if we do this thing, right? And it's totally off track. Because you want that kind of energy on your team, and maybe one of those ideas will be the next big thing, or will like surprise you in, you know, the way it works for people, the way people take to it. So I just think you have to think about your team really hard, and also, you know, yourself really hard if you're a founder, right? Like, do you want someone to balance you, or do you someone to like reflect your values? And those are two different paths.
Yeah. And also you had made mention that, you know, you had a couple of slides of what do PMs do and where do I spend my time, almost as a message that it's not very well understood and defined.
Yeah.
What product management is, or what great product managers do. What are the factors kind of contributing to that? Why is there such a challenge in an organization to kind of understand what product managers do?
Basically, a big part of it is, I think, like the deliverable is incredibly unclear, right? Like engineers write code. It's pretty crystal clear. Like, did you finish this task? Does the product do, or the software do, what it didn't do before? Designers create mocks, right? Or prototypes, right? And, you know, at the marketing PR end, it's also very clear what's happening. Whereas I think PM started in a role where it was, gosh, like, you know, the team's gotten so big, we just need someone to keep track of everything. And it's really morphed over the last few years to include additional responsibilities and to be kind of more of a decision maker in the process, right? And I think the thing is, there's so many external factors that define what makes a product great. And to be fair, some things are not in your control. Spencer and I were talking, and it was like, if I knew a product was going to be great and it was going to take off, I would be a VC. If I like had the formula down, I would be a VC and I would make a lot of money, right? But none of us know. I don't think anyone would have bet on Snapchat super early, right? So you kind of just have to like have that combination of intuition and then the ability to actually do things and motivate people to do things together with you, right? And that's, you know, that's a hard thing to define. That's why most of the time when startups get acquired into companies, the CEO usually takes a PM type of role.
Yeah. The other thing we talked about kind of our briefing previously was, you know, product management. I don't know if it's the same experience for you guys. It's been one of the tougher roles for us to fill. It's not been at Axiom Zen solely, but it's been at every startup I've been at, whether it's been 80 millions into funding or just 5 million. At every level, that role itself was the toughest to find. It seems like you're just pulling from a lot of disciplines. We couldn't go to the product management college.
Yeah.
So we all started doing this thing where we started hiring Stanford MBAs and Harvard MBAs and just gave them that role for no good reason. But are you seeing anything at the academic level or professional training that's trying to bring some more structure and formalization around product management?
There's still no product management college. That may be a good thing. Because I think what is happening is that there's a few pretty progressive universities that are doing product-oriented engineering programs or design programs. And the best way to learn how to be a product manager is to build stuff and to see it through end to end and to learn from all the mistakes you made, right? There's like no other way. It's not like any other professions because it involves other people and involves a lot of leadership component. So I keep meaning to look up the names of these colleges, but there's a couple that actually both Google and Facebook recruits from, specifically for APM and RPM programs, because they have this like, you know, cross-functional, multi-discipline projects that they do every semester, and they try to build stuff and ship it.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the APM program. So I'm not sure if everyone knows about this Associate Product Manager program. It's almost like a SWAT team training just for Associate Product Managers within Google only. I think Marissa Mayer is the one that pioneered it. I think she was officially the first Associate Product Manager. No? Was it you?
It wasn't me.
Okay, then never mind.
It's Brian Rakowski, who now runs the Chrome team. But yeah, Marissa was the one who decided it was a good idea. She was a PM at Google at that time. I think She and Salar and Susan were the first 3 PMs that Google had. Salar ran YouTube for a while. Marissa obviously ran search and maps for a while. And then Susan ran ads for a long time, and she's now the CEO of YouTube. So these are obviously amazing people who've done great things. What they found was that they had a hard time hiring PMs for other companies. Probably the biggest reason is back then the Valley was full of a lot of very heavy enterprise companies. And the skill set there is really different than the scrappy consumer internet startup, right? With like a strong engineering culture. So in some ways, Marissa said, hey, I came from Stanford with a CS background and learned how to be a PM on the job, right? Why can't we find other people that are, high potential and technical and train them in the same way? And so I was in the 3rd class. The first class was 1 person. He was our test subject. We all thank Brian for doing a good job and being smart and all that. And then the 2nd class was 12 people, and our class was about 25. And I think today they still do this. And
how long is the program?
It's 2 years. So
2 years.
2 years. So the A is really what we used to call a warning label for the rest of the organization. And same as the R in the Facebook program. It was basically to tell people, hey, they're really smart, but they probably don't know what they're doing yet. And you basically spend a year on a team in a product. For me, that was Gmail. And then you rotate the next year to a different team or product. And the idea is you get some diversity, and you also learn from great people who mentor you through it. And it's just on-the-job training.
Yeah. Do you remember how big Google was when you guys rolled out the first APM program?
Well, when Brian joined, it was probably like in the hundreds.
The hundreds. Okay.
When I joined, it was 2000.
Okay. Are they still have the program today?
They still do it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Brian runs it now.
Really? Okay. I'm curious. Is this something other companies, well-funded startups, now they're hitting a couple hundred employees, is this something they should consider kind of that kind of approach?
Yeah, I think so. So Uber just started doing this, actually. And I know that Intuit does it as well. But look, I think that one of the things that's really important is to add diversity to your company or team, no matter what, both in age and gender and demographics and all sorts of things. Having people who are super excited straight out of college with like googly eyes about Silicon Valley is awesome. They're so excited about the free food, they stay late, they have new perspectives, right? And they make work really fun. I love mentoring, managing the APMs and RPMs that I worked with, right? And I think that, they usually are so smart and so capable, and they learn so fast that makes you like really actually raise the bar on what it means, right, for someone to take on something new and to like get rid of your own internal limitations on what you can or cannot do.
Yeah, so I wrote this down. No, I wrote something else down. One of the key qualities you look for, or that you embody and that you look for in other product managers, is that people want to work with. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was noteworthy because you had to call that out, okay? Product managers, to me, just have been narrowly focusing on being the voice of the customer, driving the requirements, and getting to market.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of given our product managers, not necessarily here, but everywhere I worked at, I benefit of the doubt. If they're not nice to work with, if they're doing their job, that's their
it's
achievement.
Like broccoli.
That's the achievement. Yeah, it's gravy, right?
Great.
So it's kind of noteworthy that you called it out the way you did, and it kind of reminded me, I think, when I got what I thought was my dream job, which is head of strategy for a startup. And then it turned into a nightmare within about 2 weeks. Because what I realized is they took all my headcount away. I had no budget, and it was all influence. I actually could not get anything done within the company. So I'm getting this sense, is that what being a product manager is about? It's influence. You actually don't have engineers that reported to you.
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, until you start managing PMs, which is kind of meta. It's a weird job, guys. They all know what they're doing, or they at least think they do. When you're a PM, you manage a team, right, of maybe like 10 engineers and a designer, but no one reports to you. And actually, usually if you're at a great company, they're all super smart and they all have ideas about what the product should do, and they're capable of making it real by themselves, right? Like as an engineer, you can just make it happen, right? And so, you really have to be someone they trust and someone they actually feel like helped them make their ideas happen, rather than someone that is broccoli. We'll just say that. You don't want to be broccoli. You want to be coffee. But I also think the other thing to think about is that, PMs are not meant to be the messiahs on the mountain, or the people who go into a room for a week, come out and say, I have the grand vision, this is it, do what I say, right? I don't believe that's the way product management works, and I don't believe that's the way teams should work, because if you hire good people, no matter what they do on their 80% time, they're all thinking deeply about the product, right? And they all care, and they all have great ideas from different perspectives. So actually, I think the job is to have your own intuition, oops, sorry guys, and to have opinions, but to also listen really, really well, and to not dismiss someone's idea because they're an engineer, or because they're a designer, or because they're young, or because they're whatever, right? To take all of that out and actually take the best ideas in the room and, execute on it, including your own.
Cool.
And to say no a lot, too.
Yes, you do. I'm going to talk about Facebook a little.
Yeah.
So when we had the chance to bring Rose up here, it was very interesting because it wasn't just a great product manager, it was a great product manager that worked on products that we all have a touch point with, right? Whether it be a consumer or business, arguably Facebook is very much a business brand as we promote our products on there. And Google, if you just think about search, is a really consumer. I mean, can you live a day without Google for work? And it's fascinating that these are the last two companies you work for. And I kind of want to talk about Facebook a little. Massive consumer brand, but not well loved. I think that's fair to say. I mean, you don't see people with I love Facebook t-shirts, running around Vancouver or San Francisco. You certainly don't talk about it like maybe an Airbnb, and as polarizing as Uber is, at least there's passion there, right? And I did my research, so yesterday I went on Facebook.com.
Cool. Yeah.
And I
That's good.
I signed up because I knew you were here. And I looked for a fan page.
Welcome to Facebook.
Thank you. I looked for a fan page and I typed in I love Facebook. One page popped up among your 1.44 billion users, and there was only 9,000 followers. So my point is.
But if you look at the Facebook page itself,
yes.
How many likes and follows does it have?
I'll check after this session.
It's pretty high.
It's pretty high. Okay. So I'm kind of curious. On one end of the spectrum, you work on a product that's absolutely addicting in terms of, and you've seen the metrics. It's a massive utility. And on the other end, as a consumer brand, it doesn't engender that passion other consumer technology brands do. Not like an iPhone, for example, right? So, does that factor in at all when you guys are kind of making products? Is that designed to actually take some of the passion that you feel about the product? Even the blue and the white has been the mainstay for over a decade or nearly a decade. Is that by design to actually, like I said, not engender those feelings within your users?
It's funny because I worked at Facebook and Google, who both love blue and white. And the joke is my next job, I want to design anything but shades of blue. But that aside, look, I think there's a misconception around, or not a misconception, but when you work in tech and when you talk to people who are up to date on every single thing that's coming out and have like tons of apps on their phone, right? And understand the privacy policies and the nuances of all these different products, you do get, a neutral feeling about Facebook. It's very powerful, it's very useful, but it's not something that they're in love with, right? Probably because they've been sent too many vampire spam back in the day, or there's a couple apps that got in their email that they don't want to, and whatever experiences have happened, right? But when you do go talk to people outside of this, outside of the world we live in, like I went down to Brazil for a trip where we just stopped people on the street and asked them about how they use Facebook and how they use Instagram and other products, the response is very different, right? And I think that's something to be aware of actually for everyone building products, right? Like don't always build for yourself, and don't count on the opinions of your friends as the general consensus. But that being said, I think Facebook was designed to be a utility. Mark felt very strongly that the content from your friends is what should be getting the emotional response, not the product itself, right? It's a vehicle to deliver that content. I think in the long term, who knows, like the brand can change. But I do think that in terms of how you design your products, one thing is very true. Every single person on Facebook cares a lot about, making users happy. That is true. And I just think that like that's important, right? Like generally I would say like people are trying to do the right thing at most products we use, whether we agree with those decisions or not. And then the second thing is how they deliver that product and what they think about in terms of like the brand and the playfulness is going to evolve as people change, right? Yeah. Stickers are a huge component of Facebook now, and they're full of personality, right? And that didn't happen, 3 years ago, right?
Yeah. I think in the last 18 months, with some very huge acquisitions, you're almost starting to see them actually, I don't know if it's splitting of the brand or holding onto the master brand and having the other brands do things, but with WhatsApp, Oculus, Instagram a few years ago, they're very much their own brand. And Facebook's been very, very good parent about keeping it their own brand.
Yeah.
I assume that's
totally
very much by design.
And I think that's, in my opinion, that's super smart because these are massive brands in their own right with like strong user bases that care a lot about the product as it is, right? That it delivers and it keeps the promises that the founders of those brands essentially, launched with, right? And I think the point is that Facebook's been very clear about their mission in the world, which is to connect the world in some way, shape, or form, whatever it takes. And the more tools there are in that arsenal, the better.
That's very interesting. Okay, you can tell us, it's a small, intimate room.
With cameras on.
What the heck is Facebook going to do with Oculus?
Have you played with it?
It's
amazing.
The thing scares me. I think Pierre back there had me try it, and he flipped on one of these horror games.
Oh,
and I
that's
jumped
not
out
the
of my
best way to start.
It's amazingly immersive, but without giving everything away, can you give us a hint why a Facebook will require an Oculus?
I think Mark made this statement actually
I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you.
Dude,
I don't know this Mark guy. He's not here.
You don't know this Mark guy?
He's not here.
You haven't seen the movie? Okay, so my take on Oculus and VR is that it is all about kind of like a new form of communication, right, and bringing someone closer. So I think video conferencing is still awkward and feels, just kind of like the cost is not worth the value you're getting, right? It's interactive, it has to be immersive. And the idea is like Oculus is kind of a sci-fi move, right? It is like you put on these glasses and you're somewhere else and you're completely immersed. Google's investing in this too, but this might be the new way we like hang out with people. Maybe we'll be able to all work from totally different parts of the world and still feel like we're in the same room without glitches and without all the weird things that technology still hasn't figured out.
I think I could read between the lines. 3D animated GIFs. I got it.
Which is the solution to everything.
You guys should tweet this out. I finally got the answer. Let's talk about Google a little. Okay. Gmail is still a product that kind of. I was there to get one of those very hard to get invites.
Nice.
I think back in 2004. And it reminded me of the first iPhone in that Gmail actually didn't do much from the first version in terms of a web email client. Yeah. What it did, and I thought it was kind of gave me a different take on launching a product and product management, was it did one thing superbly. Mm-hmm. It basically gave you so much storage. You never, ever had to organize mail again. And that was absolutely liberating.
Yeah.
Is there like a big lesson there where you can really pick something that's an order of magnitude, that one feature is order of magnitude, and just run entire version 1 launch on it?
I think that's huge for product design, and especially in the mobile world where like the real estate you have is so small, right? And you have so much competition for attention, essentially, right? One of the things I talk a lot about with people I'm working with, for my team, is you need to be able to explain your product to me in less than 30 seconds. If you have to say, well, it's kind of like this, but it does this better, and it's 10% better in this way, and then if you're like near something with a beacon, then it'll do this, then you've lost me. and if you lost most of your users, right? For mass consumer products, do one thing really, really well and start there before you add all the other bells and whistles and what you need to do to compete. And that's really hard to do, actually, right? Because we think about product in very nuanced ways, and we also inevitably design for ourselves. So one of the challenges, like working on the photos team, a lot of the brainstormings will go down this path of, well, when you take a massive vacation with like 10 other people to this faraway country, you go to like 5 different places, it's impossible to organize your photos. And like, yeah, that's absolutely true. But, what do people want like on an everyday basis? There's got to be a bigger problem than that, right?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious because I never got a clear answer on, not from you, don't worry.
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of founders, and there was always a different kind of approach to competition. I've worked for some founders who are religious about never, ever trying the competition. What's the point? We're trying to beat them. They can't take us where we want to go. We're going for something completely novel. And I worked for other startups in which we were absolutely obsessed with the competition. We were trying everything just to understand what was working for them, breaking it down, exploiting what worked for them, and then try to kind of fast copy, follow the good parts, and then work on their weak parts. Now, where do you kind of fall in this? And you can't say both. Both matter.
I don't believe in fast follow.
Wait a second. Okay, I'll let you finish. I thought I saw stuff on the slides. Is it moments? Wasn't Facebook moments kind of a very late entry into group photo sharing?
I don't think so. I mean, if you play with the product, the flow is so completely different than anything else out there. The face rec technology is kind of a game changer. And I think that actually, I say every good idea, right, has been, hashed over probably a dozen times before it ends up being something that you actually heard about and used, right? Webvan was 10 years ago, 20 years ago now, and Instacart is something that is like gaining a ton of traction. That's the same idea with like a small twist, right? So if you limit yourself to only completely brand new things by principle, it's just like very hard to build a company or a product, to be honest, right? But I think that, the key is not to say, I'm going to do something 10% better or 20% better or even 50% better. You have to be a game changer. You have to be like multiple orders of magnitude better at some task or something of value in order for people to switch, especially for super entrenched players. A good example is actually, I worked on Google Desktop, which is a local search product. Spotlight is probably what you're using now on Mac. This is before Spotlight was useful, right? And so back then, it seemed like a great idea. Google does search, right? You can search the web. Why can't you search your own freaking computer, right? But as we got down the path of competing with the operating system, it really stopped making sense, even if we're 20% faster and 7% better and index things that Mac didn't. It just wasn't worth it, right? So I think that's the way to think about it. Yeah. I do believe in looking at the competition. I do believe in knowing your market. I don't believe in putting blinders on. But I think having that knowledge is where you need to push yourself and say, what can I do that's 10x better, right? And is this the right market for me to be in?
Great. I'm just going to run down a couple more because I know there's probably quite a bit of questions that you guys have for Rose. I want to get to those in about 5 minutes. But I'm a marketing dude. Mm-hmm. So features to me fall in 2 buckets because I'm trying to find something newsworthy and novel that I can tell press folks about. So they fall in one bucket that's really an innovation, truly novel, no one else is doing it. Or they fall in another bucket where it's a catch-up. You're actually catching up to compare. It's a product gap filling. Yeah. So what percentage, as a product manager, have you spent, do you think should be spent looking ahead and also just taking care of the problems of today?
I generally think it's it depends on there's a lot of caveats in my answers, but this is just because there's no universal answer here. So I think if you're a scrappy small startup and is do or die and running out of funding in like 12 months, look ahead. Just look ahead. Screw the past, right? Find that one thing that you can do 10x better, and like that's all you need to do, right? And that's all you should focus on. At a larger company or at a product that is more mature, like Photos or Gmail or some of these things I worked on, I tend to spend my time in a 50-50 way. I think it's important to listen to your users and do the obvious things, like, for Gmail it was like internationalization, IMAP, right? Like better search, all these folders. People really wanted folders, they hated labels. The delete button, right? All these things that people are asking for are important. But at the same time, you're trying to figure out, like, is chat integration great? Like, should photo sharing be more centered towards like email, etc.? And same thing at, on the photos team. But I think at least 50% of your time should be spent looking ahead. And one of the things that I interview for is I will ask a PM candidate, what if you were the PM for Uber or for, Instacart or Facebook events or whatever product that is just they use and we both use and are interested in. And sometimes I'll get an answer, and this is where I will normally avoid this hire, who say, well, I would interview users, I would run focus groups, I would do some surveys, and I would understand the market, and then I would figure out like what the right thing is to build. That's great. These are not bad things to do, but a PM should have an opinion. They should have lots of opinions, and they should be able to point to any random product they use, and they should have tons of ideas on how it can be better and what are adjacent spaces it should go into. And you should be able to like temper yourself and say, what would you build in 3 months versus 6 months versus a year? What kind of bets are you making? And that's important.
Right. I'm going to wrap up this section on a very simple question. Where do the best ideas come from? That's it.
You're the best.
It's really simple.
No big deal.
Yeah, in your experience, where are they coming from? What's your trick?
So I think that generally they come from the team. That's the short answer. So they come from people who are working on this 24/7, and no matter what function they are. And sometimes they come from totally random kind of side projects, actually. So I generally find the ones that are like, not the ones that you do user research on, and you've like thought through and like really validated, but the ones that you're like, I'm going to make a bet on this and it may or may not go, but like 10% of the time it goes amazingly well and you're like, holy shit, right? It's usually like 1 or 2 very passionate people who are just like, cannot get this idea out of their head, and they'll do anything that's possible to make it real. So they work on it at nights and weekends. They like talk to everyone they know about it. They bring it up every one-on-one, even though I'm like, that's great. How are you doing on this like other thing that you're actually tasked with, right? And those tend to like actually, be some of the best ones.
Excellent. Rose, thank you so much for being part of the first Declassified. Great to have you here. Big round of applause, guys. At this time, I think we got Paige running around. There she is with the mic. So we're just going to look for hands here. Rose, if you spot one, I spot one.
We'll spot one right there.
Red shirt?
Towards the door. Red shirt.
It's on.
No. Or whoever gets there.
Okay.
Sorry,
Hi.
there are very bright lights in my face.
Yeah.
I'm Calv. I run a local agency here, and we work with a number of startups. And something we face a lot, and I kind of want to hear your opinion on this, is the CEO that is the product manager, but then has to transition to getting a product manager within their team. How does the project manager deal with, obviously, demoting the CEO's responsibilities in that situation?
So I think that the CEO, this is actually a really good question.
It's a really good question.
Yeah.
We were trying to keep it non-controversial. We actually talked about this. Yeah.
Well, I actually
Thank
said
you.
that I don't want to join a startup that is too small, because at that point, I think the founder or the CEO generally is the product manager, and they should be, right? It is your blood, sweat, and tears, right? And it's like your work going into it. I think at that point, one is that the founder and CEO has to be incredibly self-aware. So they have to know if they're ready for a product manager, right? And then at what level are they ready? So do they need someone to block and tackle for them and, kind of take care of the day-to-day, but they're still setting the vision and direction? Or are they ready to kind of give up that level of responsibility and hire someone more senior? In that case, like, it's a very I generally say for that kind of conversation that the PM and the CEO should have a very, very candid conversation before you sign the offer, right? Like, what are you willing to give up? What are you not, right? How are you going to stop yourself from jumping in? Who's going to hold you accountable to that, right? And make sure they just agree on that level. Does that help?
Well, I'll pass it on.
To your CEO.
Ask them some hard questions. Ask them some hard questions before they hire a PM.
My experience with founders is they're finally ready to hire a product manager. They're basically they're trying to find a mirror of themselves that wants to do the shit they don't want to do. So just be very cognizant of that. I've worked with a lot of founders like, I'm ready to do it, relinquish kind of the product control. They've basically effectively hired someone that only believes in their vision. So there's always that dynamic that's a little challenging. So.
Hi, I'm just coming from the perspective where, let's say you're kind of both the product manager and the CEO, and you have an idea, but you don't have the development team in front of you. So the part about, because you have these different types of product managers, how do you generally lay out the spec? Like, do you think it's really important to have a lot of details in the spec, or do you just look to hire people that get the vision and can kind of build it?
The spec for the product, or
yeah,
the spec
like when you're explaining it to developers, because some people are more visual, some people are more...
Totally. So I typically think that these days product changes so quickly and code speaks louder than anything else. So my first iteration on a product spec is 1 page. It is very, very simple. It is like, here's what you're trying to do. Here's what success looks like. Here's what I think the key features are. And even to a certain extent, here's where you're not trying to do. And maybe like a couple wireframes, right? I find that with smart people, that's enough to get the ball rolling. And then you have to spend a lot of time figuring out like what, is the first thing to build. And usually at that point, you're iterating in mocks, right? After that round, rather than in words. Because it's just easier, right? Or in actual prototypes. Like someone will just be like, so I implemented this, what do you think, right? And you guys will go back and forth on it. But yeah, keep the documentation light. Don't put a ton of details down, because also I think that limits the ability for the other parts of your team, right? Your engineers and designers to add their touch to the vision, right?
I am curious, at Facebook, when you guys were, how broadly did you kind of share the initial requirements? Because I imagine...
super broad.
Really? I imagine a company like Facebook, everyone has an opinion because everyone's using Facebook. It's not an enterprise.
True, but everyone's also really busy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty open, transparent culture, and I know those words get tossed around a lot, but basically most documents were public and searchable somewhere if you were interested in looking for them. But you also, I think this generally happens, right? You get to the point you realize you cannot worry about everything. It's just impossible, right? And so you have to focus on your scope and your product, right? And then you kind of only worry about other things when they become very real. So typically feedback cycles from employees happen not at the specs level or the idea level, but when they were being dog fooded. So when you were actually using them, then I might send the PM a note being like, hey, this is kind of crazy, or I never used this. Like, have you guys thought about X and Y? But I think a big part of this, especially as teams and organizations scale, is that you have to trust people. You have to trust that they have the best intentions. And when you do give feedback, I generally think that it's important to not assume that, they were trying to do something bad or they didn't look into it, right? So it's more like, I don't understand why you made this decision. Please tell me why, right? And that's just important from a cultural perspective. Not being broccoli.
Next question. Up front.
Yeah. In Google or Facebook, did you use any methodology or framework to run the product team, like Scrum, Agile, or you had your own?
I think that this is actually a really interesting question. So if you roughly looked at things and said, what methodology do teams I worked with use, is probably closest to Agile. But there was never a team that I've been on that followed any one of these to a T, or had the framework set up where it's here's what you fill out every week or things like that. Generally, it was I actually think it's important for each group of people, right? And I think of pods of like engineers, designers, and PMs to decide for themselves what works, right? Because I mean, this is pretty specific, but you know, the PM's job is to find the best way to communicate with their team, no matter what their team style is, right? You have to be the kind of adaptable one. So you have engineers who hate meetings, who only want to respond to requests over code reviews. I got on code reviews. You have, you know, designers who like, you know, don't want to whiteboard with you, and they only want to deliver, you know, things that like in a certain way. You work through it, right? You just make sure you have an agreement that like everyone can agree on. You definitely don't want obviously, I don't think anyone's doing waterfall. I don't think anyone's having super long product cycles. Everyone's trying to move as quickly as possible. I think generally, like, the only thing that I'm a little bit religious about are kind of weekly team meetings. I feel like that cadence is absolutely necessary. And then one-on-ones, right, with like your key components. So I generally have one-on-ones with my design or engineering lead every week, just to have like an honest conversation with what's going on.
So every product team was allowed to use whatever development methodology they wanted.
Yeah.
Sounds like a disaster.
Yeah, it seems to work.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll see about Facebook. I just signed up yesterday. I'll let you know tomorrow.
Yeah, let me know how it goes. Let me know how it goes.
Well, you know how it goes.
I mean, there are some internal tools. This happens at every company. You'll build some sort of internal version of Wiki. There's some sort of chat channel like IRC that everyone's using, right? There's some sort of bug tracking tool that you use. But some people use bug tracking religiously, right, for all feature requests and things like that. Some people found that to be too much, and they just use like a Google Doc, right? I think when you are trying to manage at that level, at that scale, it actually is just kind of like a waste of time. Because if people get stuff done, however they do it, that's great. If people are not getting stuff done, then you go into the weeds with them.
So we have a question over here.
Hi, Rose.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm an intern at Ericsson right now, and we're doing this thing called Intern Showcase Project this year, where we team up with interns across North America, and I'm the PM for my team. But because all of my team members are at other offices, I'm the only one in Vancouver. I find it really hard to keep my team engaged, and people are starting to drop out of like team meetings and stuff. So do you have some advice for me? Have you like faced similar situations?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that we haven't found the technology to replace face-to-face interactions. And I'll just acknowledge that your job is really hard first. And that one of the best tools a PM has to like be that person someone wants to be with is actually like lunches and coffees and all the stuff in between the meetings. So you're not just the person telling someone you didn't fix your bug, right? And having that personal connection is really important. So I totally get your pain. I think that depending on the circumstances, if you can actually find things to do that are not work, right? And actually feel like there's a team morale and there's ownership, that's really great. The other thing is just honestly kind of like being a little militant about following up and calling people out when they don't make the meetings, right? I think if you set an example saying it's okay that you're late, right? Or it's okay you couldn't make it, then it becomes okay, right? And that's a tough one to do, especially since, you know, this is probably not the full-time work of your internship, right? And it's not like your hiring decision depends on this or not. So it's like, where are the stakes, right? To a certain extent, but you just have to find a way to rally and know the personalities of your team members well enough to figure out how to motivate them. I hope that helps.
Free donuts worked. I've seen that work.
Yeah, free food works really well.
Free food works really well.
Free food and drinks work really well. Yeah. Also, if you know their friends, right, or their significant others, that helps a lot. Use all the tricks in the book.
Do you want to know how the guys do it with me? So we have PMs here and we work on various products. So when I don't attend meetings, they make decisions on stuff.
Assign tasks to them.
No. They do stuff I think purposely I don't like, and then they ship it, and then the PMs will tell me, well, you weren't there. And then,
that's true.
Yeah, that works really well. So like ship crap the other guys don't like, I guarantee they'll be at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Greenhill. I'm CEO of My Best Helper here in town. And my question is, there's an old adage in IT saying that you can have 2 out of 3 things: on time, well done, and within the price range. How has that changed, and how do you get projects to deliver? Like, how many of the projects actually ship when they're supposed to ship, honestly? And how do you actually make sure that that happens?
Most projects do not ship on time. Especially in consumer products.
What kind of advice is this?
It's not advice, it's the truth.
This is like horrible.
It's the truth, right? Look, I actually think that it's important not to get too militant about scheduling. And this is where, if you do, there's 2 things, right? One, it creates like this kind of, basically with engineers especially, this concept that you don't understand their jobs and you don't understand how hard it is and you don't know what happens in the cycle, right? And then the other thing is with designers, usually if you're too rigid on schedule, they feel like basically you don't care about quality. So those are 2 things to watch out for as a PM. Look, part of it is just building in slack time, taking every estimate and multiplying by 2. It's usually even for the most senior and the best people. The other one is also asking some really hard questions, especially as I got into management, right? This was something that I had to get really good at, which is, okay, well, what would it take to ship, like in April, right? And this is actually a really good question to ask, because usually it's cutting features that people believe are absolutely necessary, but are really not. So usually I would say slim down the project, right? And also keep people accountable to like, why do we miss estimates so often, right? Like there's like 2 trends. One is sort of that people thought they had defined the project and they didn't. And so they keep going back to the drawing board. And if you're in that phase, then just, kind of get rid of the deadlines in some ways. You're not ready to have them, right? You're ready to say, we should know with this research, like the answer to this question, but you're not ready to set a ship date, right? Or it is that I think the other thing people do is try to cram in too many things to the cycle, right? We're not set cycles. So smaller milestones are much better, like weekly or bi-weekly milestones for engineering projects I tend to find work really well. And you have to find things that fit into that confine. Even if it's things like, I'm gonna build the infrastructure for this project so that in 2 weeks we can start building the UI. I hope that helps. But I've rarely had a product ship on time.
Hey,
I'm getting a
Rose.
good product manager
sorry.
next time up here.
Yeah.
Hey, so my name is Jonathan. I'm an engineer. I'm in the back over here. I'm kind of curious. A lot of the products you've worked on look like your engineers were able to dog food, right? Faced with a situation maybe where you couldn't do that and where your engineers don't really have the opportunity to see that, what lengths would you go to give them kind of a contextual awareness and maybe a empathetic understanding of their customer? And like, how would you go about doing that faced with that situation?
Yeah, so we actually had this problem. So you would think photo sharing is universal, but you can imagine like a product like Slingshot doesn't appeal a ton to the engineering crowd who are in their 30s and have kids and families and a very busy life, actually, right? And slinging things back and forth with your coworkers is also not super fun because it's just not the right crowd, right? So there's a bunch of things that you can do. My favorite is honestly just actually bringing engineers into user research sessions or focus groups and making them watch someone use the product and someone of the target demographic, right? And I think that creates more empathy and kind of like more drive than anything else I've seen. And so we did that a bunch of times with a few projects. We've had research sessions at like sorority houses and fraternities in like small colleges where we give people some product for a week and come back and interview them about it and have the engineer and designer there to watch and hear them talk about it.
Do you ever crowdsource some of this user focus groups or feedback, or you always ran your own?
So you can run surveys, which are helpful, but if you're looking for early stage products where you're still deciding on like, am I shipping this or not? Or are there some fundamental questions that I think you do need like actual user research where you see real people use your product? And generally those were in-house. Anything else?
I think just to be a little mindful, I do want to get to any questions that are on Twitter as well. So I'll give the mic over to you, and then maybe we can check if anyone's tweeting at us. Cool.
Hey, Owen. Product roadmap, what does that look like for you?
I like product roadmaps in the 3 to 6 months range because I think you can be very specific and you can be very accountable. I like product visions or kind of high-level statements at the year-long stage. So by the end of the year, we will be in this many countries. We will have figured out monetization. We will have grown by like this range, right? But then the 3 to 6 months roadmaps are much more detailed. Like we will launch this product, we will like increase this metric by 10%. We will, have like launch at least these 2 things, or we will figure out this specific problem. We'll fix the top 10 issues on the user, triage list, whatever those things are. But I think anything beyond that, you just know you're gonna change it.
Does that actually surprise a lot of people how short a product roadmap is nowadays for even large, consumer companies like Facebook? I was actually surprised to hear this. Yeah. I mean, 3-6 months, that's it in terms of roadmap?
Yeah. I mean, you know where you're going roughly, right? But the market changes so fast, and also, you learn as you ship things, right? And you might change your mind.
You would do horrible at Oracle.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah.
I just want to tell you.
Yeah.
We had 5-year product roadmap.
Yeah,
so,
Microsoft too is tough because, the whole backwards compatibility thing and long product cycles for operating systems.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
IE6.
I had a job offer there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I took the Google one instead.
Any other questions or Paige, any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions on Twitter. This is from @TeamMBH. What 3 products, apps, or tools can you not live without as a PM?
Huh.
Oh, I like that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Email. Unfortunately, calendar. I think those are cheating. But let's see. I like using Sketch for wireframing. I find it's like a good medium between, basically, paper versus Photoshop, right? And then I also, I like Asana for task tracking, if you have the ability to use it. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's about it.
What was the third one?
Well, email and calendar. Can I count that at least?
Okay, which apps? Which apps?
Which apps?
Yeah.
Like
which one's your favorite calendaring app? Just
I use Sunrise right now, but I think unfortunately most of us, you join the company and you use whatever they use. Sometimes it's Outlook, which I also worked on in an internship 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think Sunrise is pretty good on the phone. Google's got the best enterprise suite, in my opinion, for email and calendaring.
Awesome. We'll give it back to the crowd for the last one.
Hi, just want to ask a simple question. So, would you take a project that you're indifferent with, but with an excellent team and whatever support you need?
Yeah, I probably would, because the advice I usually give people when they're picking teams is pick the people. So, because if you're indifferent now, you have the ability to not become indifferent to it with the right team.
Thank you.
Cool.
Is that it on questions?
We're good?
Good?
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome.
Thank you again, everybody, so much. I think, thank you, Rose.